I've been to Montreal a few times.
Yeah.
I feel like always glad to see you.
I think the last time we saw each other was in San Fran.
That is true. That's true. And tell me about, you're here, you're in Montreal. How did you get here?
Oh, wow. I was living in Vancouver. That's where I went to school, at Vancouver Film School. And I worked there for a year after I graduated, doing freelance film on the side, and I was a TA at the school. But I don't know, I wanted to get into games, and I felt like the market was really saturated there. And I love the idea of living in Montreal. It was sort of a city I'd always wanted to live in, and I knew that they had a huge game industry here, and I was ready for a change. So I just picked up and moved across the country.
Not bad.
Yeah.
You spoke French before?
I still don't.
You still don't?
Je peux parler un peu. I'm practicing a lot.
Not bad.
Yeah, I can read it decently now. I'm getting there. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Way to go. And you've been in town now for how many years?
5.
Okay, 5 years. You sounded natural to me. That was great. I'm still working on bonsoir in the evening, bonjour in the daytime. Okay.
What always gets me is that there's no good morning. Like bonjour is hello and good morning. And I'm one of those people, I really like to say good morning, so I can't quite replace that.
Gotcha. The challenges of languages.
Indeed.
Okay. So you made the pilgrimage from one coast to the other.
I stopped in Saskatchewan on the way, so I was there for 3 months. I stayed that's where I'm from. Yeah, I'm born and raised.
Okay.
Yeah, so stayed the summer with my parents and lined up a job in QA just so I had something.
Perfect.
And then I came out here. I did QA for a year, and then I started freelancing full time. It's just a matter of getting enough contacts.
Right.
Yeah.
Jumped into the freelance market, and one of the games that you mentioned earlier was part of that.
Yes.
Right? And that game was...
Anamorphine. Anamorphine was the gateway for me.
Got it.
Yeah, that was a project I started for free. They didn't have any money. They didn't have anything. You know, they just sort of quit their jobs. There was 3 of them. There's 3 co-founders. They were like, we love this project. We're going to go for it.
Yeah.
They applied for the Execution Labs program, which is unfortunately no longer running.
Got it.
And I helped them with the sound for that.
This was a Canadian-funded program, or?
Yeah, well, Montreal funded.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Really local. And did you know Jason LaRocca?
It rings a bell, yes.
He was involved in that. Yeah,
got it.
So, yeah, we built a vertical slice, and we got accepted. One of 5 teams, the only Montreal, I think the only Canadian team that was accepted.
Yeah.
And it was just a 3-month intensive. We got office space, we got equipment, we got funding, and we got mentorship, we got lunch and learn type teaching environment.
Nice.
It was fantastic.
What a great step into, like, with the full-on package of support around it.
Yeah.
Name of it again?
Execution Labs, but it doesn't. They've stopped.
Execution Labs is gone. Yeah. You have a video online for this, don't you? It has the bass and the playing.
Yeah. Well, there's because the video, I guess, that we did for Execution Labs, it does exist on YouTube. It's very, very early.
Should I dial it in?
If you like.
I want to. This is a great video. So remind me the name of it.
Very old. Anamorphine. I mean, you'd almost have to search by a date and get the oldest one, or the second oldest. Don't put my name.
Framing?
No, just go Anamorphine. Because they would have posted it. See, these are all much newer.
I know, right?
Yeah, this is sort of post-release. Keep scrolling.
Yeah.
No, see, those are all post-release.
Okay.
Or
this is why I was gonna attach your name to it, because the one I found was through your. Let me do it.
You're gonna have to search by date, maybe. Okay, I'm curious. Which one?
This one, Music of Anamorphine.
Oh, this is not one of the early ones. This was later during the process of.
So.
You got the music level low on the video.
Yeah, I do.
We did record a real cellist for this, it made all the difference.
Oh, I bet. This is the part that really was just subtly beautiful and completely effective. It's just having that available there, in the room, positioned. It's part of the music, but it's also positionally anchored. And again,
So what happens here is when it transitions, the emitter moves from her to your head,
perfect.
and then sends to a big wide stereo bus to get that effect. And then is transported, of course, with the player into the next scene.
Awesome. Thanks for unraveling that, because I think a lot of times as players on this side of the screen, right, we're experiencing it, and we can, after a while, kind of start to dissect some of those tricks, some of those technical strategies that we use to get the feeling that we want from the sound.
Yeah, I don't think you'd have to do it that way anymore, because if I'm not mistaken, you can do like a 2D to 3D slider now. Right, but I did this on Wise 20, I think we started in 15 and then moved to 16, so that wasn't possible at the time. So this was, it's like, how do I move between those spaces naturally? So that was what I came up with.
Sweet technical solutions. And I do know you as a technical sound designer, right? Primarily. So what would you say that that term really means to you?
Wow. See, I wouldn't identify as a technical sound designer, but I wouldn't not either, if that makes sense. Especially coming from indie, I think it really gave me the opportunity to do a little bit of everything. I get to do music, I get to do sound design, I get to do Foley recording, I get to do the voices.
Okay.
And I get to integrate, which is key for me, right? I love integration. I love interactive. I mean, that's what brought me into games, because I was doing film before. Yeah. And I got this taste of building these interactive, dynamic environments, and I was hooked. So, I mean, what does it mean to be an interactive sound designer? No, what was the
technical sound designer? Yeah.
It's such a dry expression.
Can you separate the two? I feel like
you separate technical sound design with sound design?
From sound design, yeah.
I think you could.
Okay.
I would say that there are probably people in the world who identify as technical sound designers first and foremost. But I think that most of the time you're going to get, a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah. To make the best sounds for an experience, you should understand how those are going to be played back, the system of playback and whatnot. It's
so important. I think it's really vital in your design process to have an idea of how those sounds are going to interact in the game. Right. Which is something, that's changed a lot in the last couple of decades. Because it used to be you just made your sound assets and you threw them over to the programmers. But that's such a dry way of designing, and it's so unsatisfying as a sound designer. Right? Yeah.
It's we'll say a little old school, the fire and forget methodology of some of it, and there's still a place for it.
Sure.
In limited scope or smaller experience, for sure. But again, for someone like yourself, you're thinking about. I'm just imagining the process of sound design from a content creation, informed by how you plan on playing those sounds back. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, so my personal favorite workflow is if I can do it all at once, which is not always possible. But if I can get into a space where I can make a sound and plug it into Wise and plug it into the game and play around with it and then iterate on that. All sort of in the same day, in the same hour. That's you can really get into a flow then.
Yep.
Yeah.
The tighter the iteration loop, the more you can iterate on something. And this is something I feel like even in my short time in game audio, we have made huge strides. Closing that, just tightening that loop between. It used to be. Let's compile the game for an hour and then here are changes. Someone was talking about, we're going to mix this with a pad and paper and then run back to our desks, key in these values, push the button on the build, and then wait.
You're plugging your sounds into an Excel spreadsheet and waiting for things to get populated.
0 to 1 values, right? And so So yeah, that iteration loop really does allow for that evolution of.
I'm gonna grab my
Yeah,
sweater.
you should. Yeah, it gets a little chilly in here. By the way, Montreal winter.
You know, it's not. It hasn't been that bad.
No, I guess not.
It's like what, -2 right now? No
Yeah.
wind.
It's fine. It's fine.
It's not. Yeah.
There's barely any snow. There's only fear of death when
You
the
gotta
sun
get
goes
good
down
boots.
and yeah,
Good
yeah,
grip. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's probably the ice on the streets is the worst part
Yeah,
here. Because
exactly.
in Saskatchewan, the weather is worse. I mean, the winter is worse. It's
Yep.
colder, but it's dry, so you don't get this like black ice so much.
Yeah.
You don't get the melt and the slush and the ice.
Yep.
It's just cold.
It's just dang cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Minnesota, born and raised.
Oh yeah, you've got that.
I know all about
Mm-hmm.
the depths of winter. I traded some of that for the rain in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with that.
I like
Exchange.
Seattle.
Yeah.
I have friends there. I visited it a lot when I was living in Vancouver.
And
Good
similar
place.
to Vancouver, I'm thinking.
Yeah,
As well. Do you know the name of the cellist?
Oh my God! Gotta put me on the spot like that.
I know.
I'm really bad at names, but I could find it really quickly. I ought to. She's the sister of a local game designer, actually, or a game because he was working in the gameplay space, and that's how I found her. Because it was just like, oh, my sister plays cello, and she did great.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, what a great trajectory. It's 5:00 here. Beatrix and I are taking a beer.
Yes.
Hallelujah to that. If you're not old enough to drink, look away.
Nothing wrong with being. I don't know. I grew up in a German family. There's nothing overly taboo about. Goodness me. It's terrible.
Beer o'clock for sure. Wow. We can circle back to the cellist.
I have a really bad head for names,
Yeah.
so I lose them really quickly.
Right.
I'm gonna find the Anamorphine credits list. And then,
Oh wow.
yeah, it's here in
Who can do it faster?
Yeah, well, I've already got it. I just have to load it and then scroll to the right place.
Okay.
Marianne Bertrand. Yeah, and our
Pretty.
violinist was Ariel Swan,
Excellent.
which is a good story how I found her,
Okay.
actually. So I was going to see a show
Mhm.
at a venue on Saint Laurent here with a friend of mine. We were meeting there, and I'm bad at names, so I mixed up the venue, and I went to the wrong venue, and they also had shows, and so I went in and didn't know where my friend was. My phone had died, so I couldn't contact her.
Of course.
But the artists that were playing were fantastic, and I was really enjoying the show. Just a little intimate environment. And Ariel Swan was performing with them, and they were doing sort of a semi-improvised thing. She was playing her violin, and she had a bunch of pedals, reverb and delay. And just fantastic. And so after she finished, I just introduced myself and gave her my card and brought her in to do the violin, because I was composing the music,
Yeah.
but I'm not classically trained.
Got it.
So I need people who know their instruments and can bring that, because I don't know what a violin can do, but she definitely did, and
Sure.
she brought some really beautiful stuff. Like I think I wrote 3 or 4 additional songs after we recorded her, and I'm still using her material.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. And doesn't that feel the best when you can take someone who's creative and really just empower them to do what they do
Yeah.
within maybe a framework, within a context, right?
Yeah.
But you just get a clear representation of their spirit, their energy, and it comes through.
Yeah, for some of the tracks, I played the music because it was all done already in its MIDI format, and I just said, just improvise, just do whatever you want on top of this. There was some really nice darker droney pieces. She got the screeches going. She brought her own pedals. It's fantastic.
Yeah, like how do you transcribe screeches? You know what I mean?
Exactly. There's probably a marking for that, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Great. And so from there, so you're still freelancing. You had this great incubation experience.
I'm not still freelancing though.
Oh, but this
No.
is like full-on bona fide in-house like paycheck.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I finished freelancing. I mean, I had to finish up some projects, but I'm working on a feature film right now, and I'm just like, it's almost done, and then I'm gonna just let it go.
Got it.
Maybe work on some of my own things.
Yeah.
I liked freelancing, but it was exhausting, right?
Yeah, it can be.
Actually, Max invited me to come speak at the February Audio Shack.
Great.
I think I'm going to do a talk on moving from freelance to in-house.
Nice. Yeah. I like that. I like it.
He suggested the topic.
Yeah.
And then I was, as we go to Benelux after the AIM, or Interactive Audio Montreal, and I got to talking with some freshly graduated students, and I realized I had a lot of material because they started asking questions, and I just like, okay, I have a lot of things to say. So.
Perfect. Well, and let's screech and hold like I Am Montreal. This was just last week.
Yeah.
This is a regular meetup here in Montreal, right?
Yeah, it's been going. That was a 2-year anniversary, that event. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic.
We love that. And the Vancouver Film School in Vancouver, they have a meetup that's happening now on a regular basis as well. What about your community? Do you have a regular meetup? Maybe you've seen the Worldwide Game Audio Groups map.
There's a map. I'm on the bad at names. Slack channel. Yep.
And so community is omnipotent, right, in the age of the internet. But with these local meetups are also extremely valuable as well, and folks coordinating that. A big shout out to people pulling together their communities, game audio on the ground, both socially and educationally. This was great. So this was my second I Am Montreal, or maybe they do another one called Montreal Beers once in a while, which is a little more social.
That's organized by Simone, right?
Yeah.
I've never actually been to one. I need to get on the mailing list.
Okay. Yeah. Somehow that's a thing.
I've been to a couple of them by accident, right? Because they end up in the same place.
Sure.
Yeah.
Again, with like the you went to the wrong bar and accidentally there was game audio.
No, because
like
the Interactive Audio Montreal, they often go to the same bar. Like that's what happened here, right? Because they were doing the audio beers there as well.
Exactly. So, but the I Am Montreal meetup was cool last week.
It was great.
Because
I really enjoyed it.
they had a speaker come in from out of town, a guy named Mark Esdale.
Yes.
He runs a dialogue production company called OMUK. And a lot of cool takeaways.
Oh, tons. Really, really enjoyed it. It's like I have to run out now, get a couple of DPAs,
Right, because this was like the, put a couple microphones on the forehead and uncage the voice performer, right?
Right, because this allows the actor to move.
Yeah.
You're not worrying about phasing. They can get really into the character. I thought that was great.
Yeah, and the other piece was, he was talking a little bit about
the face phase?
Well, how oftentimes the best performance is the first performance.
Take, that's right.
Yeah. And that it's, I don't know if they call it a cold read. Is that a term,
actually,
right?
that's what actors call it.
Okay. Yeah. Like, and so he was kind of advocating for this idea of the cold read.
He's actually diving into some neurological studies. He wants to get some going specifically to figure out why this is. Something about the instinct or the first sort of feeling. His whole thing, right, was the actor has a really solid sense of who they are. And so they're able to dive into that character instead of trying to read lines that somebody else has written and make them fit the character.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Wealth of knowledge. It's great to have him in town and sharing that with us, right? And then, like you said, popped out to beers afterward. Hallelujah. I'm going to circle back to another thing that you mentioned, which is the Game Audio Shack.
Yeah, I haven't actually, because this is only the second one.
Right.
The first one was over the summer, and I wasn't able to go to that because I got married 2 weeks earlier, and so it was not going to happen.
Congrats,
Thank
got
you.
it.
Yeah.
Game Audio Shack, somewhat, prototyped in Seattle with a thing that we called the Bash.
Okay.
Game Audio Bash.
Nice.
And this is a meetup that happens between Vancouver and Seattle
Oh, shit.
in a town called Bellingham.
I know Bellingham.
Yep.
Yeah.
So midway between the two cities, and this is a prototype that Max has taken over for the Game Audio Shack, which is between Montreal and Quebec City in Drummondville, right? Home of poutine, I guess. It's like they're famous for it, right?
I've never been there. So.
Which, side note, like potatoes, cheese, gravy.
Curds, right? It's not just any cheese.
Whoa. Whoa.
It's a special kind of cheese.
Clearly
you can't just throw some pizza mozzarella on there.
Okay. But that's it, right? Potatoes, curds, and gravy. That's the basis.
That's the core.
It's the core.
Yeah.
I had it with smoked meat last week. I also had it with hot dogs. This was...
Oh, yeah, like chopped up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Poutine a million ways.
You ever heard of La Banquise?
No.
It's like one of the more famous poutine houses in the city. They're open, I think, all night. So their biggest lineups are like 4 a.m. after the bars close. And they have maybe 20 different varieties of poutine. And they're all really good.
Yeah, I mean, you're like two great tastes that go great together, poutine and after the bar closes.
Right. That's like the ideal environment for eating poutine. It's very rich, very greasy.
I'd probably eat it for breakfast. But
with some eggs?
Sure. Yeah, totally.
I guarantee you somebody's serving breakfast poutine in the city.
Yeah.
Probably several people.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
Okay, so Shack. Yes, I went to the first one last summer. I was actually in town, and it's great. They bring 2 speakers from Quebec City, 2 speakers from Montreal. Yeah. There's a little bit of, improvisation with crowdsourcing some topics, putting people in a chair and putting them on the spot.
Yeah.
Great community building event, and really pulls together, when you pull together 2 different communities too, you just get that rich experience that comes through diversity, I guess. So anyway, I look forward to hearing about how that goes for you.
Sure.
Tell me about where you are now. Like where has your path led to today?
Well, I went in-house in middle of last January, so nearly a year now. It took me nearly a year to completely stop freelancing. As I said, I'm still on the dregs of that.
Got it.
I really like it. I really, really like it. I'm not working for a AAA company, right?
Got it.
And so that means that even though it's a big company, I think we're at 650 employees now.
Yeah.
But lots of little projects. Smaller teams, 20 to 30 people for the most part. Most of the time, one sound person. So tons of ownership.
Yeah.
Still an environment where, the last game I just came off of, it's called Real Brothers. You can find it on the App Store.
Got it.
And I did the music for it. I'm not hired as a composer. It's not my job title.
Sure.
But, it was a small game. They didn't have budget for a composer. I said, I can do the music. And they said, okay.
Bam.
And that was it.
Yeah. So even at 650, that feels very scrappy. Like you can just get in and, it needs this? Yeah.
Tons of ownership, tons of... what's the expression when you're free to do whatever you please? You're sort of independent. Yeah. Like
autonomy.
Exactly, a lot of autonomy.
Yeah,
really enjoyed it.
Got it.
And I've had that experience on most of the projects that I've been on. It's just they trust you. We're 8 people. We're 8 sound designers at the company of 650. So, you see this a lot in sound. You're sort of in your little black box. You're in the corner. You're doing your own thing. People are just like, do the thing, and you're like, yeah, I got it, and they're like, okay, thank you, and that's it. And you can sort of really dive in and do it the way you'd like.
Nice.
And the advantage, one of the things I really like over being indie, is I've got some really solid prog support. Really, really talented programmers. And so far they've really valued audio and given me the support that I need. It's been fantastic. Yeah.
And is part of that because as part of this larger company you have the time, as we were talking earlier, you in that pre-production phase when things are still a little bit loose and wobbly, you can plant some of those seeds and develop some of those relationships and grow some of these ideas over time.
So Artifact 5 was a company that made Anamorphine.
Yeah.
That was really the only project I ever got to work on in indie that gave me R&D time, which is it's really rare in indie because they don't have the money to pay a sound designer to do R&D.
Gotcha.
Most of the time they they're bringing you in halfway through.
Sure.
You're catching up. You don't have time to do that creative brain picking that some other crew members get to do. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of the time in indie, you're not even working in-house with them. You're not in the same space as them. You're
Sure.
working remotely on 5 different projects. And you just don't get to dive into the creative nuances of what's possible in a project.
Right.
Right. Artifact 5, fortunately, they really valued sound. They knew it was going to be a very important element of the game, so they brought me in super early. And I was in-house with them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you were able to kind of unfold these ideas and have that kind of autonomy.
But it's not normal in indie. And now I get that again. I have time to dig in, learn new tools, or figure out what is possible with a tool, what we need. Lots of time just for documentation and design writing and things like that, which is maybe not as much fun as sound design, but it gives you a chance to really flesh out what you want to do and then present that and pitch concepts or features.
Yeah. And I wouldn't wonder on the indie scale, like what the level that you're able to contribute coming in halfway. You probably have to work, I would say, harder or longer to achieve something, whereas had you been there earlier, you might have a much smoother path, and actually over a longer period of time you could get away with less, if that makes sense. Maybe. Which is to say, well, if indie developers could leverage audio talent earlier, then it would go smooth.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of like what we were talking about at the very beginning, is that not only are you playing catch up, but you're trying to like stick your triangle sound into this square peg that they left for you because they don't necessarily know what you need. And now they're reworking their tool set, or they're reworking the way that the architecture of the game was already built, just to try and fit in the sound stuff that you need. Whereas if they designed with that in mind, it would have grown together. It would have been a little bit more natural in the way it all fits together.
Got it. Interesting insight. Thanks for that. Speaking of design, I've got a challenge for folks that are tuned in. I want you to think about this for a little bit. We got a little more talking to do, but I mentioned some shenanigans up front, and we're going to get up to something, that's for sure. I want you to think about if there is a kind of sound or even a very specific sound that you might like to hear recreated on this live stream. No promises, of course.
No, I'm not working with any sound banks or microphones.
Yeah.
So I've just got whatever you've given me in the box here.
We get the sandbox and that's it. So we'll see what we pick up. But if you have some ideas, put them into the chat, and we'll get them surfaced and try to come up with something fun. Now, there's one project that I need to dig a little deeper into, because I'm a huge fan of Paloma Dawkins. And I saw that you worked on Museum of Symmetry.
Yes.
Tell me about that. That was NFB sponsored that in some way?
Yeah, so it was the game studio Casarara who did the actual development of that. Then we had a producer in from the NFB, and Paloma was creative directing.
Got it.
Yeah. That was a really fun project.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that a lot.
Okay, and for folks who are not familiar with it, what is it?
That's not an easy question to answer. It's a VR experience.
Okay, great.
It's an interactive experience.
Perfect.
But I don't know if it would be a game in the traditional sense. It's fairly linear. It's a very fun experience.
Yeah.
You really get swept away into this other world, and you get to move between these different spaces and interact with these interesting characters.
Yeah. Which is totally her MO.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
Super trippy. Yeah. Also. Yeah.
Yep.
Really, really enjoyed working on that. It should be noted I didn't do the sound design or the music. I did the integration specifically on that project.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so VR, what does that mean? Integration for VR to you? Like what are the big things you take away from that experience as like learning or challenges, or like, I don't know, even like things that need to be solved for the future?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for sound, it's specific to the project to some extent.
Yep.
Right? We developed Anamorphine for VR as well, so I had some experience coming into it. One of the specific things that we had to make sure we got right in Museum of Symmetry was vocal positioning.
Okay.
Because the characters they're 2D, but in a 3D space,
Got
right?
it.
And their speech animations are just loops of mouths opening and closing.
Right.
And sometimes you have more than one character speaking at the time. So it was really important that we made sure the player understood who was speaking to them.
Got it.
And so for that we used the Oculus binaural plugin.
Yep.
I really liked it on Anamorphine. We didn't use it for everything, but we used it specifically for speech.
Right.
It's effective. It's easy to use. It's free.
Yeah. And speech dialogue is in that kind of frequency range that really lends itself to spatialization, to positioning, and I think we're all super trained, right, to localize speech in that way. So.
And it's really effective. I actually found that on Anamorphine, even when you're playing it on a screen with headphones, it works.
Okay.
It's like, for example, one of the main props in Anamorphine is a record player. It shows up again and again in different formats throughout the game, and you can really tell that it's down there to your left. Even if you have to suspend disbelief, but it's a first-player game or a first-person game, and so I actually think that there's room for 3D spatialization even in non-VR games.
Right.
I absolutely think that.
I agree, and it's a tool in the toolbox. In a lot of development environments, and there's no reason not to give it a try. I was working on mobile 2D games, on the screen. You had positioning left to right, but there were these opportunities oftentimes to actually start a sound before it came on screen, and taking and pushing that off the play field with sound, widening that in a way that it really enhanced it, really helped, right? And it's not a typical expectation for a 2D screen locked game.
I played a game once. It was supposed to be a game that you could play without. It was a audio only game.
Got it.
And I was really disappointed by it because there's so much opportunity to create this 3-dimensional audio space, even when you're just listening on headphones.
Yeah.
And they didn't take advantage of that because that's what I wanted. I wanted something where I'm really playing the game because I can hear there's a drop of water over there. And and that's where VR comes in because you can turn your head and that positioning moves and that really cinches it. But I think there's so much more room for that level of spatialization that is just not taking advantage of.
So let's make a comparison like music, right? It's like some music is like headphone candy, right? They just do all the fun tricks. I mean, we know stereo is a known thing. We've had it for a million years, right? And some musicians take advantage of that. They will do fun things with stereo, right? And I think that, again, it's got to be an artistic choice, right? You have to have access to the tools. That's pretty well established at this point. But then you actually have to do it, right? And a lot of times, I wonder if that comes down to resources, if that comes down to that iteration loop. As that iteration loop gets tighter and we have these opportunities, will we be able to start thinking outside of outside of the screen and into this wider soundstage that we have at our fingertips?
Definitely. And I think there's also a question of the tools becoming more and more available, right? Like that binaural plugin, when we started using it on Anamorphine, it was new, and I think I spent a month just testing different binaural plugins to try and figure out what worked best for us. There was another one that we tried, and I really liked it. I tried it out at Unite in Boston, and I really liked the demo of it. But when we tested it, we realized that if you took this sustained sort of sine wavy sound that is a cello and you move it in space, it's glitching. It's fragmenting, and it's like only happening with the cello sound. There's something about that sort of particular tonality that's so specific that just that you can't move it around in space. And it wasn't doing that. It wasn't doing that with the binaural, the Oculus one.
Exactly.
Well, actually, I had a gym. The programmer made me, I had like a spinning ball that was an emitter, and I could really figure out what does it sound like. Can I hear it above? Can I hear it below?
Yeah.
But now, those tools are becoming more and more available. More and more people have a chance. There was so much less information when I did that project.
Yes, absolutely.
And the other one you were asking about, sort of the barriers, or what's the next thing that'll really help with VR. And I think that the other one, and this is the problem that I had in Anamorphine, was ambiances.
Okay.
So, you've got your traditional ambiances, which are stereo loops or whatever, randomization, but they have no spatialization at all.
Got it.
Then you have the other end of the extreme, which is just a bunch of 3D emitters, which sound really good, except that now you've got potential, voice or CPU issues.
Yep.
And on Anamorphine, we did a blend of the two, which was really effective. Because room tone doesn't need to be spatialized, and it's a game that takes place in an apartment for the most part.
Sure.
But it's something that I sort of dived back into with Museum of Symmetry, and I think I went the full emitter approach in that game. But what I would really like to do, and I think this is a thing that I've not done, but I know is now, I think, viable, but the technology is still new.
Got it.
Which is that you've got these, I think, ambisonic
right
spaces.
Yep.
So you've got that multi-point, like a stereo recording style of file, but it's staying put in a VR space. I think that's really important to have that, right? It's not going to be your key emitters, but to have a general atmosphere, I think that's going to be a really, really important tool.
The breadth of a ambisonics bed like that, the cuteness of positioning, even from the static playback of this linear piece, is going to be a game changer for ambiances that can benefit from that. And layer on top of that these positional emitters that are like hero emitters, if you will, the ones that that will draw attention to themselves appropriately within the context of the environment. Now you're starting to edge towards more believability, right?
Right. And I think even again with this, I don't think it's exclusive to VR. I don't.
Right.
I think that even non-VR games, particularly first-person games, could benefit from that.
Sure. Totally. And like as processing becomes more and more available, as optimizations of the ambisonic format become just get better and better. There's this idea of orders of ambisonic. Have you heard of this?
I have.
Okay.
I went to the Audiokinetic talk about it at SAT 2 years ago.
Right.
It was cool.
So higher orders of ambisonic with that greater detail, less of the smearing between sources within that kernel. We're scratching the surface of the level of believability that will be available for all experiences, right? And I think you're right, though. Like right now, it's kind of seen as something that VR, XR needs, right? In order to believably immerse someone in that environment, that is like it's it. And the people making those experiences recognize the value of it. So people think this is where that technology goes.
Yeah.
But you're right. It is really something that could apply across any experience.
Right. So let's think about it like an example game where you've got a stereo bed. Something generic. You're in a forest or cityscape. Well, it's great. But it is a stereo bed, which means that if something happens to pop out and you turn your head at the wrong moment, not in VR, right? Just like in the game, you turn your character, and it's like it breaks that illusion.
Yep.
And why not? Why not build a locked down, 3-dimensional ambisonic bed? And now you can put all your other stuff on top of that.
Yeah. Well, and that was an interesting transition even, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, was the idea of separating the bed from point source emitters, right? Like, we all probably have examples of creating that content where that one cricket in the corner and I just gotta cut the loop just a little tighter, because if that comes around, we're gonna hear it every time.
But it's also depressing, because when you cut all that stuff out, you end up with something that's bland and gray and boring and uninteresting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But then you sprinkle the spice of these positional emitters on top of it. It brings some of that back.
Absolutely. But sometimes there's a life, right, to that beautiful, natural field recording.
True.
You're not going to get it back in the same way. Now you're creating an artificial environment.
Yeah.
Right? And ambisonics lets you have the best of both worlds, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely an evolution of the concept, and again, another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, for sure.
Toy in the toy box? Speaking of toys, I think it's about time that we got down to some nitty-gritty crazy business. Let's look in the chat and see what folks have surfaced for us in here. Ooh, a mech suit walking around. That could be cool.
Classic laser gun.